So hi, I'm Dowding. I'm Professor in Clinical Decision Making in the Division of Nursing, Midwifery and Social Work at the University of Manchester. My role involves research, where I do research on decision support systems in nursing and the broader healthcare system, and I work very closely with colleagues in the University of Manchester in digital health. And I also teach in the Division of Nursing, Midwifery and Social Work, predominantly on decision making.
Great. So it's my pleasure to talk to you today, Dawn, about your academic career. So could you start by telling me a little bit about why you chose the career path that you did?
It's purely by chance, really. I went to university at the age of 18 in the late 80s, and I wanted to be a nurse, but at the time there wasn't that many degree programs for nursing. There's a few around the country, but in general, they weren't very common. And I'm quite practical in my head. So I sort of figured if I did a degree in something else, but also trained as a nurse, if I didn't like nursing, I could go and do something else. So I ended up doing a joint degree program at City University and St Bartholomew's Hospital in London, where I did a condensed RN program and a BSc in psychology with nursing studies. So I graduated after 4.5 years with a qualification in nursing and my degree in psychology. And I'd actually really enjoyed my psychology degree. I really enjoyed doing the research components of the degree, and really loved the sort of approach to research. And nursing at the time wasn't necessarily as evidence-based as it is now, and nursing research was quite underdeveloped. So I sort of found when I went back into practice, it could be quite a frustrating place to be, because I was quite questioning, and sometimes that wasn't necessarily appreciated in some of the clinical areas where I was working. And I just happened, I worked for a year at St Bartholomew's and then went to a different hospital where I worked in the ICU unit, and realised after about 6 months I didn't want to do ICU nursing. And in those days, if you wanted to specialise, you went off and did a course with the English National Board, and the unit I was working on wanted me to go off and do that course, and I really didn't want to do it. So I was looking for another job, and I was just really, it was just serendipity. I was just looking for different jobs that I could do. There was an advert for a research assistant position at Surrey University working on a project on nursing assessment, which I applied for. And I just thought, well, if I get it, I get it. And if I don't, I don't. It doesn't really matter. I've always got, can always go and do something else. And I ended up with that position. So I started working as a research assistant on that particular project, and I've never really looked back from that point onwards, really.
So it sounds like that was a real pivotal moment for you moving into a research career.
It was, yeah, and it was an interesting time because it was the early 90s, and I can remember Nikki Cullum, who is now our director of the Applied Research Collaboration, coming to Surrey to talk to us about the new Centre for Evidence-Based Nursing that she'd just set up at York University, and being very excited by that sort of approach to trying to evaluate evidence for nursing. I mean, I was working on a big study. They actually were very supportive at Surrey. They gave me the funding to do my PhD part-time, so I was doing that alongside my my day job. And yeah, it was just something that I fell into, but I found I think I'm quite naturally good at doing research. I've never found it particularly a challenge, and I really enjoyed it. So I just sort of, I was just in the right place at the right time, and was lucky enough to have a supportive employer who enabled me to do my PhD at the same time.
Great. So you did your PhD, was it part-time over?
Part-time over 4.5 years.
4.5 years. And then what did you do?
So in between, at the end of my PhD, so I'd been working at Surrey for about 4 years, and I was a contract researcher. And we moved up to Scotland. So I was working at Surrey doing my PhD part-time, Surrey, remotely from Scotland, which again at the time was quite unusual. That was I had a very sort of progressive boss, really. But it was apparent that I couldn't carry on doing that level of commuting. Because again, I mean, it's a different landscape now, but in those days, having a PhD and being a nurse was quite unusual. And it was at the time when nursing programs post Project 2000 were moving into the universities. So there was a big expansion of university level nursing education. And I happened to be in Scotland at the time when that was happening up in Scotland. So they expanded the Department of Nursing and Midwifery at Stirling University, and they were looking for lecturers. So I'd been a contract researcher, and the uncertainty associated with that is, as you well know, quite anxiety provoking. I had a mortgage to pay. So I applied for a job as a lecturer in the Department of Nursing. I hadn't as yet got my PhD, but I was in my last year of my PhD, and they employed me as a lecturer with the understanding that I would finish my PhD within the first year of being there. And they gave me some study leave to enable me to do that. So that's where I went next. Is I went and started to work at Stirling University as a lecturer.
Right. So it sounds like there's been a few hurdles to overcome. From what you're saying, that one of the major ones is the uncertainty of being a contract researcher.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely think I would have loved to have stayed in full-time research. I would have absolutely loved to, but the opportunities available and the stress associated with being a contract researcher are actually quite large, and I think it makes you, if you've been in a contract research position, you're always very aware of that when you're employing people on research grants. I'd sort of know how anxiety provoking that sort of situation is, and it's a juggling act. You sort of, at some points in your career, you have to make a decision about if you want to carry on doing full-time research, then you probably have to accept some of that uncertainty, or if you want to move into a full-time academic role, then there's different challenges and there's different things that you need to, you need to be comfortable teaching. For instance, you can't be an academic and not like teaching, I don't think. And I'm lucky I did. I mean, one of the other things that happened alongside when I was working at Surrey, because the research we were doing is in the field of decision making, we had somebody from the Open University come and give a seminar, a professor called Jack Dowding, who's now retired. And I was talking to him after the seminar about the research we were doing. And on the basis of that, he invited me to be a lecturer, an Open University tutor on his course that he was running at the time on professional judgment and decision making. So even though I was a full-time researcher, I was also working as an Open University tutor on that course. So that gave me some teaching experience, which at the time I didn't realise how lucky I was that I'd been given that opportunity, because they gave me training, and I did that for about 4 years. So by the time and I carried on doing that when I first started, when I moved up to Scotland as well for a couple of years. So at the time I started at Stirling, it wasn't like I'd never taught before. I had actually done some teaching as well.
So it for you, there was that real opportunity that came out organically just from having a conversation with somebody, and that built the foundations for your teaching career.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of only realise in retrospect just how lucky you are. I mean, some of it is just taking the opportunities that are given to you, and some of it is maybe being a bit proactive about trying to get those opportunities. But yeah.
Fantastic. So what other hurdles do you think you've overcome along the way in terms of building your academic career?
I guess I wouldn't see them as hurdles. I guess that's one of the things about it, is that I just sort of, I've always worked on the principle of if something sounds interesting, I would apply for it or think about doing it with the assumption it's not going to come off. And I think that one of the things I've learned over my academic career is that you have to be very resilient you have to be able to accept rejection and failure and learn from that and move on and try again and do something different and figure out what it was that made it not successful, so it's better next time. Because that's the nature of academic life, is that you very rarely write an academic paper that gets accepted first time round, and if you're lucky you might get reviewers' comments and get the opportunity to submit it, but sometimes the journal says no and you just have to pick yourself up and redo it and send it somewhere else. And grant funding, you can spend months working on a grant that you think's brilliant, it goes into the funding body and it gets turned down, and you have to be able to pick yourself up and regurgitate that. And I've got better at that over the years. I think, like many people have got a career in academia, I've got a long graveyard of grant proposals that have never seen the light of day because they've been rejected, and I couldn't ever face looking at them again. But I've got better. I've got better at recycling them. So I think that's some of it. I think another challenge is just really accepting that. I mean, one of the delights of academic working is that no 2 days are the same. However, that is also a challenge because no 2 days are the same. So you're constantly juggling different things and having to move your brain from doing from across different activities. So, in the morning I might be teaching, but in the afternoon I've got to sit and work through a research proposal, and in between I've probably got to deal with some emails from students and queries. And once you move further up the structure, you're sort of managing people, managing things, and so that has its own challenges. So you have to be good at time management, or I think you have to be good at time management. And I think early on I realized that there was an issue to do with work-life balance. So I've really tried very hard to try and make that a really important part of how I work, but also encourage the people that come to work with me on research grants about that. I mean, finishing my PhD was a real insight. I mean, after giving up working, I mean, I did it part-time in 4.5 years. So that was, bye-bye to most weekends. And right at the end, when I was writing up, I wasn't getting much sleep. And at the end of it, I just thought, well, that is not sustainable over the long term. I'm never going to do that again. And I never have. So I now don't work weekends. I don't work evenings unless I really have to. And try and be really good at time management so that happens. And I think in some respects it helps being a bit more focused.
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of people do PhDs in part-time over 6 years. So that sounds like a really intense period of time where you must have really put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
To make it work. So you've talked about some things that have helped you along the way, like opportunities to get involved in teaching. You've talked about really supportive bosses and an progressive environment. What else has supported and encouraged you along this journey?
I think it's genuinely the people that I've worked with. I've been I think it's serendipitous, really. I ended up in my early career, I managed to end up working in a couple of departments that were very supportive, with bosses who were very supportive. But then I've been able to choose where I've worked. And really, I've learned that you want to try and work with people who are collaborative and who can provide a supportive environment to enable you to develop, and not all academic environments like that. And also working with bright people, I people who are going to challenge you and enable you to develop. I've worked with some outstanding people over the years, and I think that's really the thing that I reflect on the most. And I think I've been very lucky that I've had some good mentorship. I've learned a lot by moving around in terms of what works and what doesn't, in terms of supporting more junior researchers. Yeah.
You mean moving around in terms of the topic of research, or the institution, or
both? Well, I mean, I haven't really moved topics. I've sort of morphed and progressed, and I think that's the nature of research, because actually I couldn't carry on doing the same research I was doing 20 years ago, because the world around us has changed. And some of being a successful academic, I think, is recognizing how the world is developing around you and what research might be something which people might want to know about, what's going to be funded, what's important, and being flexible enough to change what you're doing slightly to address that. So that's one thing. But I think I've worked in a variety of different universities now, and I've been out to the States twice. I had a fellowship, the Hartness Fellowship 10 years ago, and then as you know, I moved back to the UK from the US a couple of years ago to Manchester, because I worked out at Columbia University for 4.5 years. So I think both the experience of working in different academic institutions, but also working in different academic environments culturally, is really, it really makes you appreciate the things that you do well, but also the things that could be improved, because you learn every place you go, really.
That sounds like a very dynamic experience.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and again, it was the Hartness Fellowship was. It sounded like a really good opportunity. Not everyone can up-sticks their family and move to America, but I was lucky enough that we had the flexibility to be able to do that, and I just applied for it, thinking, well, if they say no, they say no. It doesn't matter. And I think sometimes that's one of the hurdles that people maybe put in their way, is rather than worrying about the rejection, it is almost like expecting it to be rejected and then be pleasantly surprised when somebody says yes. It's a mental.
That's a great defense mechanism, Dawn.
It's a mental attitude, but it works. I mean, you know, because otherwise I would never have taken those, risks, I guess.
Yeah. So my final question for you today then is about what you think makes a successful academic career today.
Yeah, it's hard. I've been thinking about that quite a bit, because I think the environment today is very, very different to the environment that I was in when I started my academic career. And I could get a research assistant job with a bachelor in psychology, which you would never be able to do now. So I think for nursing that's a good thing, because I think we're progressing as an academic discipline if you need to do a PhD. But I think it's hard. I mean, I think it's hard because it is a hard thing to do. If PhDs were easy, everyone would have one. So I think that's one of the things is that if you want a successful academic career, then it's acknowledging that actually some of the things that we do are not easy, but they're achievable. And I think being focused, I don't think you need to have a huge clinical. I mean, one of the things that you hear quite a lot is when people qualify that they need to go and get some clinical practice under their belt before they come back into academia. I don't think that's true at all. I think you can be a very good academic with very limited clinical experience. I think it's more appreciating what you know and what you don't know, and working collaboratively with people in clinical practice to do research that matters to clinical practice. Because my skills and expertise are in research, and their skills and expertise are in clinical practice, and together we can do good research. I think it's being, as I said, I think you need to be quite resilient and able to deal with rejection, unfortunately. But also the opportunities are great. So it's being focused and managing to see through some of the challenges. And I do think being aware of the fact that an academic job is both research and teaching. So being able to juggle and manage those two things can be a challenge, I think. But if you can do that, then you will be a good academic.
Great. So I know I said it was my final question, but I've also got another question. So when we talk about successful academic careers, do you mean success in how you view success, or how externally academics are viewed as successful?
So I guess there's two things. I mean, I think that we get assessed as academics on external metrics like the number of research grants we bring in, the amount of money, research funding we bring in, the quality and the number of publications we have. And we should also be evaluated on the quality of our teaching and what our students think about us, and things like how many PhD students we've successfully supervised. So they're external metrics, but I think also there's some more personal success metrics that I look at. And one of the things that I think is something that I've always tried to do is to nurture and support and mentor early career researchers to help them move through their careers. And I would see success in that way as helping them to achieve potential. And I guess, as I was saying to you, one of the things that I am quite proud of is that one of the very first researchers who came to work for me when I was at York University is now a professor at Bradford, and mentoring somebody all the way through their career to a point where they've reached that is just a you know, that for me is well, I'm very happy and proud.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn, for your time today. I'm sure lots of people will find that talk very interesting.